Morning, church. Not as smoky in here as it is out there, is it? So, some years ago, I read about a guy named Tom Sullivan. Get his picture up here in a second. And Tom, he is a world-class athlete. He won 2 national championships in wrestling. He runs 6 miles a day, has over 40 jumps as a skydiver. He earned a degree at Harvard in clinical psychology. He is a musician, he's an actor, and he's an author. He's like the Renaissance man, right, of today. The one thing about Tom, though, you should know, is that he's blind. I know now why he jumps out of airplanes. I can't see where I'm going, might as well do it, right? Think about that, though. First time he realized that he was blind, he was 8 years old. I read this story about him. He was 8 years old, he was in the backyard, and he heard some kids playing baseball at a local field next to his house. First, he hears the crack of a bat as it hits the ball. New sound. Then he hears the thump of the ball hitting the glove. New sound. He realized that they were playing some sort of game. And he was 8 years old. Of course, he wants to get involved. So he got a stick, and he got a rock, and then he taught himself how to hit the ball. You're thinking, how did he do that? I'll tell you what he did. He set up a transistor radio on a tree stump so that he can hear it. And then he would hit the rock towards the stump. He got to the point where he can hit the transistor radio every single time. After several transistor radios, he goes up to his dad and he says, I want to play baseball, Dad. Imagine Dad at this moment. Okay, what position do you want to play? I want to play pitcher. Okay. So Dad talked to the guy who managed the little league club. He knew him, and somehow got Tom on the team, on the baseball team. So now you have a boy who can't see pitching in the little league baseball team. Can you imagine the guy who stands by him to catch the ball when it's thrown back from the catcher? Can you imagine the guy, this little boy, who's standing by the plate, 9-year-old boy, frightened because this blind kid is going to be pitching a ball at him? True story. After hitting several kids, knocking them out, not striking them out, knocking them out, he decided the game was not for him, which obviously pleased his opponents very much. In his book, he writes, it's a book called If You Could See What I Hear. It's an excellent book, by the way. I would strongly recommend it. In that book, he writes that the turning point in his life was when he asked his dad, can I play? And his dad said, we'll make it happen. And I think as you go home and read the life of Tom Sullivan, and I strongly recommend you would do that, you'll realize that a lot of his success was due to 2 parents who didn't treat him as if he was blind. I want to read to you about a turning point in another blind man's life. It's found in John chapter 9. And we're going to look at verse 1 together. John chapter 9, verse 1. It says, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. We're going to stop there for a second. We'll come back to the rest. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. Now, I don't know about you. I've had some friends in my life that were blind. One in particular, her name was Liz. And she was a fireball. In fact, we both graduated together from Atlantic Union College a long time ago in Massachusetts. And she did way better than I did, even though she was blind. She was able to get all her stuff in Braille. She could read Braille. To her, she was blind from birth, so she doesn't know what seeing looks like. But like Tom Sullivan, she could hear things. Her other senses were keener. And it was an interesting experience. We studied the Bible together, and she was baptized just a few months after I was. And Liz never allowed her blindness to get in the way. Of course, these are different times, aren't they? In those days, if you were blind, you thought that he or she might have been cursed by God because of something they did. And there's one thing that's worse than feeling insignificant, and that is actually needing people to feel pity for your insignificant life so that they will give you some money so that you can survive one more insignificant day. That was the life of this young man, sitting in perpetual darkness, feeling somewhat alone. Your imagination is powered by the sounds you hear, the suggestive sighs and audible whispers of those who are ignorant or perceive these different failures that are really not there. So his disciples in John chapter 9, verse 2 says, his disciples asked him, Rabbi, again, this is the mentality, who sinned that this man or his parents, that he was born blind? I mean, whose fault is it? That's the question that they're asking. I mean, obviously it's somebody's fault. Have you ever felt this way? I wonder what he did to deserve this. I wonder what they did to deserve. They're not as blessed as this person. I wonder how many times, as people walked by, you heard these implicative words. Whose fault is it? Whose sin is it? I wonder how many times we have unwittingly added insult to injury under the pretense of inquisitiveness. No, I'm just asking, really. I'm not trying to insult this man. I'm just wondering, whose fault was it? Because I'm hoping it wasn't his fault. Well, if it wasn't his fault, it would have been his parents' fault, right? According to this philosophy. How many times might we have contributed to the spiritual and emotional despair of those who are already collapsing under a burden? Sometimes we don't even realize how easy it is to strip away dignity. And we'll say things because somehow we're not blind or we're not struggling with something. And so it's so much easier to be able to just say something that we don't realize it is so hurting to the person who's listening. But of course, the disciples were only echoing the sentiments of the times. Calamity meant punishment of sin. That's why you have it. I wonder how many times he himself had rehearsed in his mind I wonder what I did. I wonder why this is so. And that's not so much different than people today when they go through something that they think, well, maybe it's something I did. God, why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? And so Jesus in chapter 9, verse 3 says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. What? So was it an uncle? I mean, somebody had to blow it, right? No? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Wait a minute. What? I'm blind, but I can hear. Wait, are you saying God made me blind so that, all this time so that somehow he can do something glorious right now? Thanks a lot, God. Quite often, in fact, I have friends who are atheists that will quote this and basically say, you see, people are just kind of like pawns. But I want to read it to you the way it really should be read or written. It really should be like this. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But so that the work of God might be displayed in his life, we must do the work of him who sent me while it is still day. In other words, Jesus wasn't saying this happened because God's going to do something great today, and so he's waiting for this day. No, Jesus said, look, this happened, and since this happened, today we're going to do something great for the glory of God. We often lose this in the translation, but this is really important to understand. In effect, what Jesus was saying is you're asking the wrong question. Why are you always looking for someone to blame? This is not a cause and effect scenario. We always like to come up with a cause and effect scenario. But what he was saying is this is the result of a broken world. But today we're going to make it right. This is not about some unsolved theological riddle. This is about a suffering brother. And I want you to watch God work in a moment here. Today, this man was chosen by God as an instrument to reveal his power and goodness. Unbelievable. Have you ever experienced that in your life? Have you ever experienced, I know you're not blind, but have you ever experienced something that later on you look back and said, look what God just did? God is an amazing, amazing God. We used to sing a song, Our God is an Awesome God. Remember that song? Is he still awesome today? Yeah, he is. So in John chapter 9, 4 and 5, he says, as long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming, and when no one can work, while I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. While it is day. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the sun is going down. Yes. Have you noticed this? Or is it just me? I don't know if you noticed this, but I think we're getting used to the darkness and we don't even realize it. While it is still day, talking, I remember my dad got cancer. And visiting him, I lived in Pennsylvania. They lived in New York. I would go every single weekend right after church to visit him while he was still alive, while it was still day. And I remember when I knew there was only a few days left, going into his room, and he looked like a shadow of the man he had been in my life, and talking with him and saying, Papa, in Italian. Do you know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that God loves you? And he said, oh, I don't know, Sergio. I said, well, do you love him? Oh, I love him. I just don't know if he loves me. Why, Papa? I've just done a lot of things that I'm ashamed of. But Papa, right now, in this very moment, you can give your life to Jesus right now. In this very moment. And he will accept you just as you are. Amen. Dad, while it's still light. And then I asked him about heaven, what he thought heaven was like. He's like, I don't know. I go, well, what do you miss the most? And he talked about growing up in his little town of Roccasecca, Italy, and all the stuff that he could do when he was a kid. And I go, you think of that, and times it times 1,000, 10,000. And that joy you feel inside, it is going to increase and grow. Your capacity to experience that, Dad's going to be great. Dad, do you believe in Jesus? I do. And then I read him the text that we read a few weeks ago. Do you remember that? The one that says that if you believe, you have eternal life. And I remember him tearing up. And we prayed together. And I went home that day. That was the last day that I saw my dad alive. While it is still light. Maybe there's somebody in your life, while it is still light. A few years later, my mom was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And so now we start again visiting her every weekend. And I saw her deteriorate little by little. I don't know if you know much about Lou Gehrig's disease, but it's not a fun disease at all. And if you could think that there's a disease even worse than cancer, Lou Gehrig's disease is really bad. Some of you may know it as ALS. And little by little, she began to deteriorate. And somehow, I don't know how, I don't even know where I got it from, I had several steps to Christ in Italian. And so I go to my wonderful mom who had been born and raised and went to church as long as she could as a Catholic, and giving her this steps to Christ and saying, Mom, would you read this? And if you can't, you can have Roseanne read it to you. Kill two birds with one stone. And she said, sure. Thank you. A couple of weeks later, I saw Roseanne downstairs, and I go, hey, how's Mom doing? Well, I gave her a book a couple of weeks ago. Do you know if she's reading it? And I remember her saying, oh, yeah. She keeps reading it. In fact, she's reading it the second time through. I'm thinking, you read it once to make your son happy. But if you're reading it twice, God is speaking to you. And she left this journal doing this journey that she went through. And in this journal, she writes all kinds of things. And you could just see it. I should bring it someday. Her writing gets worse and worse and worse and worse. But one of the things that you realize, one of the things that you notice is that in this journal, especially towards the end, there's a lot of language that she uses that comes right out of Steps to Christ. While it is still day. I don't know who that person is in your life. In fact, we don't know when the lights go out on some of us. It can happen like that. While it is still day, we must do the work. While you can still walk, while you can still talk, while you can still serve, while you can still be generous, while you can still be kind, while you can still breathe, while you are still alive, the night is coming. After saying this, verse 6, He spit on the ground. I don't know, I like to picture this. Jesus spitting on the ground. He spits on the ground, it says, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. And then he says, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. And so the man went and washed and came home seeing. Stop there for a second. We've talked about this before. Jesus doesn't need mud. Why does he take mud? He spits in the mud, takes the mud. Now you're blind, so you don't know what's coming. All right? And all of a sudden you feel this stuff on you, like what is going on? And then Jesus says, no, I want you, it's not over. No. I need you to go and wash yourself in the pool. Why? Why would Jesus do this? Well, there are several theories out there, and we don't really know why. I can't wait to ask them. But there's several good theories out there. Number one is that maybe something happened because of sin in his creation. Not that God did something wrong, but that Jesus was saying, look, just like we did Adam, we're going to now take some mud and put it in your eyes, and we're going to redo those eyes. Another theory is that Jesus wanted him to be able to do something that expressed faith, right? Now you got mud on your face. Go and wash it off. And for him to experience what he experiences next, he has to, by faith, go to the pool and wash it off. By the way, my friend Charlie sent me an article a few weeks ago. Apparently, archaeologists have found this pool in Israel, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? His neighbors, verse 8, and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others were so shocked by this, they said, no, he just looks like him. You know, there's people that look like him all the time. It's amazing that sometimes we will not believe even in the face of what we see. One of the things that Liz used to say all the time is, you know, I'm blind and I believe without seeing. Why can't you believe with seeing? But he himself insisted, no, it is me. I'm the man. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but it's me. And I can see you now, not just hear you. I know what you look like. And then it says in verse 10, how then were your eyes opened, they asked. Now this is an important journey to watch. If you have a Bible, you may want to circle this word. I did in my Bible. He says, he replied, the man. See? This word right here. Where is it? The man. The man they called Jesus made some mud and he put it on my eyes, and then he told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. And that's what happened. This man they called Jesus did this. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know, he said. Verse 13 says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind, and now the day on which, it's kind of interesting to me that they have to bring this guy to the Pharisees, but now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes, was a Sabbath. Third theory, maybe you used the mud for this next moment. Because if he just healed them, it wouldn't look like work. So now he's actually using mud. I love this. And it's on the Sabbath. And therefore, because of this, because he did this on the Sabbath, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. And he says, he put mud in my eyes, and I washed, and now I see. I've said this before. I'll say it again. He put mud in my eyes. I don't know what kind of mud it was. I don't know if it was like pharmaceutical mud. I don't know what kind, but I'm just telling you right now, he put mud in my eyes, and now I went and I washed, and now I see. And some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. See, from a biblical perspective, this cannot be a guy from God, because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. We have to be very, very careful that we base our theology on our interpretation of it rather than the truth of it. Are you following what I'm saying at all here? See, this whole thing about the Sabbath, this was their interpretation of it. They had created over 600 more rules for the Sabbath that were not even in the Torah, but they were doing it. It's pretty amazing when you listen and you watch what's happening here. And so for them, there's no way that this could be a prophet or some healer because he broke the Sabbath. This is why later on Jesus had to say, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. We'll talk about that in a few weeks when we start our series on the Ten Commandments. Cannot possibly be real, cannot possibly be a believer. Have you ever felt this way? I mean, if they don't look like us, if they don't act like us, if they don't talk like us, if they don't worship like us, they can't be believers. I see this and I hear this all the time. And this is what they were saying to this man. But others asked, other Pharisees who were not as convinced, others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were what? Divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. What do you have to say about him? Now that we've proved that he was breaking the Sabbath. What do you have to say about him? It was your eyes he opened, and the man replied what? Go ahead and circle that word. At first he was a what? A man. Now, as they intensify their inquiries, the Inquisition, now he's gone from a man to being a what? A prophet. So now the Pharisees redouble their efforts. If theology doesn't work, perhaps pressure, humiliation, and intimidation will do it. So in verse 18 it says, they still did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. How humiliating is this? Get your mom and dad in here. Hey, I'm an adult. Get your mom and dad in here. Nothing more humiliating than this, let me tell you. And I don't know, again, this is kind of humorous to me. They sent for the man's parents. Is this your son? Well, yeah. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? Look, here's what we know. We know he is our son. There's no doubt. This is the same guy we gave birth to, the same guy we've been taking care of all this time, the same guy we had to make sure wouldn't get an infection early on, the same guy that we would carry there every day, the same guy that we have loved. Yes, this is definitely our son. We know he is our son, and we know he was born blind. But how can he see now? Or who opened his eyes? We don't know. We have no idea. Ask him. He's of age. He's a grown-up. Isn't that some kid? He can speak for himself. He's blind. He's not mute. His parents said this, the Bible says in verse 22, because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. It's a sad thing when we are afraid of the leaders of the church, isn't it? Yes. My prayer is that I will never become this way. That you would never be afraid of something that I say or do. But even if you never remember my name, which is pretty easy to do, I hope you will remember that I shined the love of Jesus. Because that's what every leader should be like. There'll be times where I'll make that mistake, but never will you be afraid of me. They were afraid of the Jewish leader who already decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. In other words, they'd be expelled from God. And that's why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. A second time, they summoned a man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. I don't know about this God. I don't know about this man Jesus. I don't know about this church. All I know is that when I am there, I feel inspired and God heals my soul. There are times when I am there and the song is being sung and something happens inside. I was blind, but now I see. And if you've never experienced conversion, you will never know what this means. When you realize suddenly, yes. And he's being honest, I just don't know. Then they asked him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I've already told you, and you didn't listen. Like, what is wrong with you almost, right? He's not saying that, but he's implying it. Why do you want to hear this? And I love his sarcasm. You gotta love this. Come on. Why do you want to hear this again? Do you want to become his disciples too? This word too is really important. Because it sounds like in his heart, he's becoming a disciple. And by the way, if he's using this word, right? Disciple. If he's using this word, he's going from man to prophet to rabbi. Are you following what I'm saying here? He is a teacher now, sent from God. And he says, then they hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. They were at a point in their lives, they were so against what Jesus was doing, what the Messiah was sent to do, that they would rather be disciples of somebody dead than someone that was alive. They would rather be disciples of Moses than the disciples of Jesus. They would rather be disciples of the law than disciples of the grace. They would rather be disciples of someone that was great a long time ago but no longer is around than someone who is the greatest of all time in front of them. They would rather be disciples of what their beliefs are than the God who created those beliefs. So now, Jesus goes from man to prophet to rabbi to be followed. So the Pharisees feel like if the theology doesn't work, and the pressure doesn't work, and the humiliation doesn't work, and the intimidation doesn't work, let's try insults. This is what bullies do. You get this, right? Have you ever been bullied? This is what bullies do. These are the church leaders, and they're bullying this guy. So then, verse 28, they hurled insults at him. Hurled. I mean, this is like throwing stuff at them, right? They hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciples. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable." And then he insults them. "You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes? We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to godly persons who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do how much? Nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Wow. Interesting. The more they tried to convince him otherwise, the more he was convinced. Have you noticed that? Harassment can often end up compelling the receiver to do the opposite. Ask any teenager. Or anybody that has teenagers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So John chapter 9:35 says, Jesus heard, I love this moment, that they had thrown him out. He waited for this moment. And when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Do you believe in the Son of Man? This question has intense implications. What Jesus was really asking, what Jesus was really saying, is that following God is more important than following religion.
That's right.
This man was kicked out, and Jesus says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Don't worry about the church for a second. Don't worry about religion for a second. Do you believe in the Son of Man? And I love what this guy says. "Who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." I wish I could have been there in this moment when Jesus says, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." And then the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped them. From man to prophet to rabbi to Lord. What a journey, huh? And that is the journey that all of us go through. We just think of Jesus as a man, maybe an historical figure. Maybe we read a little bit more about him and we say, maybe he was a prophet, And then we read a little bit more and he was a great teacher, really. someone that people followed. But as you read and spend more time with Jesus, you cannot help but recognize him as the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And you cannot help but worship him. Do you believe that? So what is he to you today? Is he just a man? That's okay. You're welcome here, even if he's just a man to you. And our prayer is that we can, and our desire is to help you get to know him better and better. Amen. If he is just a wise prophet and rabbi that lived 2,000 years ago, no worries. You just keep getting to know him better. It's okay. You are welcome, and we want you to be here. And we will pray and pray. And if you pray and pray some more, you keep praying, one day, I promise you, he will reveal himself to you. And you will worship him. But don't worry about that day. Just get to know him. Are you with me? A little later in the stories, the Pharisees are saying, as they hear all this, they're saying, wait, are you saying we're blind? Are you calling us blind? Like, what's going on here? And Jesus said, since you claim you can see, then you have no excuse. So be careful who you judge. Be careful who you criticize. Be careful whose plank you try to take or splinter you try to take out of somebody's eye when your own life may be filled with stuff that you don't even realize. Be careful about that. There's an article I read just a few weeks ago, and it was entitled, "Another Tourist Accidentally Drove Their Car into Deep Water in Hawaii After Following GPS Directions." Be careful of this. I'll read you the quick little point on this. A tourist following GPS directions accidentally drove her car into deep water at a harbor in Hawaii, not the same place, by the way, and it was about a month ago. On Monday night, a mother, after a similar incident, occurred at the same location. So that's why it says another tourist. This happened twice. According to Hawaii News Now, the driver told police that she was following the GPS directions, and when she took a turn that led her down a boat ramp. At what point do you just say, you know what, maybe this is not the right way? She actually thought it was just a little pond that she could drive through. Initially, it says, she thought it was just a big puddle. In reality, it resulted in her driving her Ford Edge into the, and I'm going to say this so wrong, but Honokahu? Yeah, correct. Small boat harbor in Kailua Kona. Is that pretty close there, Nadine? A month earlier, another vehicle had been driven by tourists that had a similar experience. We all need to be careful of this. We laugh at this. But I see so many people live their lives on autopilot. They're just blindly following what the GPS says, whatever your GPS is. But I'm going to tell you right now, the only compass in your life should be Jesus Christ. In many ways, we're all victims of blindness. You cannot experience Jesus fully without being convinced of what is unacceptable and undesirable and fleeting and unfulfilling without Jesus. Until you are convinced of that, you'll never be able to fully follow Jesus. So let's stand together and sing this song called Holy, Holy, Holy. And as you sing it, think of the words that you're singing. Don't just sing on GPS, okay? Think of what you're singing. They're amazing words. And He is holy, holy, holy.